Hi everyone, thank you for clicking on this webinar. This is webinar 5 in a series of 8 webinars offered for the Cert 4 and Training Salesman qualification. Today's webinar is going to focus on the TAE DEL 402 unit, which is to do with conducting one-on-one workplace training. So this is the second half of what we call the delivery cluster. For this webinar, we'll mostly focus on content for Project 3 within that assessment. So if you're looking for group delivery and group facilitation, you want to go back to webinar 4. That focuses on the first half of the delivery cluster. So here we're talking about one-on-one workplace training. The key difference within the titles. So in the previous webinar was to do with groups. Here we're doing one-on-one workplace training. So group delivery in the previous webinar, pretend you're standing in front of a classroom training individuals, whereas for this one we're focusing on sitting down with an individual and training them in workplace skills such as answering a phone, using computer systems, or changing a tire, for example, all things that would most benefit from one-on-one workplace training. Alright, so as you can see, here's the learning objectives which we're going to cover today. So firstly, we're going to identify the need for workplace training. We're also going to prepare for workplace training. We're going to review a technique called the See One, Do One, Teach One method to workplace training. That would be very handy when you're completing your third project, when you're doing the workplace training. And we're also going to be looking at monitoring and reviewing the effectiveness of the workplace training. So planning it, doing it, reviewing it. Okay, so let's take a moment just to think, why might a trainer need to conduct one-on-one workplace training? Well, it is used to facilitate and improve workplace skills. Skills in the workplace can depend on your industry, from training someone how to use a printer, from training someone on fitting a saddle to a horse. It largely involves practical skills which are relevant to the workplace. They need to be performed at work. In this case, the training is usually conducted on a one-on-one basis whereby the trainer demonstrates the task and why it must be completed. This will be followed by giving the learner a chance to demonstrate their skills based on what the trainer has trained them in. As we speak about in every single webinar, when we're talking about anything to do with vocational training, we refer back to what competency standards are. So as discussed in the previous webinar, competency standards define industry and workplace outcomes. Thus, it is likely that a workplace training session would focus on achieving these predefined benchmarks for workplace performance. So by focusing on these, you have a clear picture as to what you're training and assessing individuals in. You're not just going astray and looking at training individuals in skills and tasks that they don't really need to know about or care about. So in a practical case, why might workplace training be needed? So some examples, as you can see on the screen. So if you have a new employee in the workplace and you're the trainer, the new person probably isn't aware of the organizational policies and procedures of the new workplace. They might, for example, have developed skills in maintaining an information system such as a spreadsheet, but they won't be familiar with the specific organizational information system. This is a perfect example of when one-on-one training should be facilitated in the workplace. Another example might be how to use a cash register. The new employee might have had previous retail experience, but might not be familiar with this particular cash register system and the relevant organizational policies and procedures. If an organization purchases new equipment or materials, such as a new printer, management should not assume that their employees will know how to set up and use the printer. Thus, workplace training would also be useful in this situation. Similar to a new employee scenario, if an employee is shifting internally within an organization, then they might be unfamiliar with the policies and procedures relevant to that task. So therefore, training will need to occur. And so this is an exhaustive list. There's plenty of other reasons why you might need to do one-on-one training, such as just simply doing a refresher, but yeah, there's just a few examples just to keep in mind as to why would you even need to do this in the first place. Well, if you're a workplace trainer, you need to train new employees on how to use new systems, on new equipment, for example. So here we've identified the workplace training needs. So when a workplace training need is identified, there are a few tasks which need to be addressed. First, you should identify whether there are any contractual requirements regarding the organization and the employees. For example, to conduct the training, you would likely be removing them from their daily work routine. Depending on how long it takes to do the training, your organization might need to find someone to cover their costs at work. In a similar light, training an individual might incur additional training costs, such as wages or purchasing training equipment. You should check with your organization to see what you can and can't do in this manner. When a training need is identified, you would need to select the most appropriate equipment for the employee to work with. In some industries, such as the automotive industry, they might have an entire section of the warehouse dedicated to training, which might include working machinery. If equipment or resources are unavailable, then some purchasing might be required. Once these items have been addressed, you should develop an individualized learning plan. This ensures that your training session follows a certain procedure and complies with organizational policies and procedures. Identify how the workplace outcomes relate to the industry standards. Identify the type of learner completing the workplace and what their learning objectives are. Okay, so now we've identified the need for one-on-one workplace training, and we've prepared everything. So we prepared any potential contractual requirements, we prepared equipment, we've got an individualized learning plan going. It's now time to actually implement the one-on-one workplace training. So there's many ways you can do this, but a great way of ensuring that you're transferring the skills to the learner is to implement what we call the see one, do one, teach one method. So in the table has the focus from the perspective of the learner. So pretend that I am training you, and you say, and I'm training you in how to create a PowerPoint slide. So you as the learner, you watch me perform the task. Okay, so by you watching me perform the task, you can see how I do it. I'm familiar with the workplace organizational policies and procedures. So what you've now watched me create some PowerPoint slides. Now what happens is you as the learner, you try performing that task under my guidance. So you now try to create some PowerPoint slides. I'll be overseeing what you're doing, and I'll be facilitating and giving you suggestions and basically fine-tuning your performance. Once I, as the trainer, am satisfied with your performance, what you should do as the learner is you teach it back to me. So now that I've trained you in what to do, it's now time for you to train back to me. So you perform the task, but whilst you're performing the task, you're telling me how to do it, and I'll let you know if that makes sense, if that complies with any other additional requirements. So this is what's called the see one, do one, teach one method. So let's do another example. So this example, we will pretend that the workplace learning outcome is to wash your hands in compliance with infection control policies. The learner might have washed their hands at least once in their lifetime, but might not be applying the correct procedures in accordance with the organization, such as the hospital. To begin, the trainer would have all of the equipment already set up, such as hand soap and a sink. The trainer might also provide the learner with a fact sheet on the correct washing procedures. After a few introductions for the what and why of applying correct hand washing techniques, the trainer will then demonstrate the technique in front of the learner. This is the C1 phase. The learner is watching the trainer complete the task at hand. After a minute or so of hand washing, the trainer might demonstrate how effective their hand washing technique was by using a UV light to see whether any spots were missed. After this practical demonstration, The learner will now attempt to complete the task on their own. This is the do one phase. Whilst completing the hand washing, the trainer might need to guide the learner during the task to fine-tune their techniques. This might take several attempts to complete to an industry standard. Once the trainer is happy that the learner's performance has been demonstrated in accordance with the learning goals, the learner should then do it one more time, except they will need to train the trainer on what they are doing. This is the teach one phase, where the learner, having just gained the experience in hand washing, will teach the correct hand washing technique to their trainer. Once this is complete, the trainer should feel confident that the skills and knowledge have been transferred to the learner and is compliant with organizational and industry standard. When you are completing Project 3 in the delivery cluster, I would strongly recommend applying this technique in your one-on-one sessions to demonstrate how you can transfer skills and knowledge to the learner. So now that you've implemented it, you need to review it. And as you can see on your screen, there are a few things which should be covered after you have implemented it, both directly afterwards and as part of an ongoing process. First, it is important to document the learner's performance as soon as practically reasonable. Was the learner able to complete the task correctly? Were the learning goals met? Does the learner's performance comply with the competency standards, industry requirements, and organizational policies and procedures? Documenting this as evidence is clearly important in case of an audit, or if the type of training requires refresher training every 6 months or year. Over time, you should also monitor the learner's performance in conducting the task in a practical environment. This seems pretty straightforward. Just ensure that the learner is still applying the same skills and knowledge and techniques within their work role. This also means that you should be evaluating the effectiveness of the learner's performance. Is the learner performing the task well? Are there any perceived issues with how the learning is going? Has the learner learned any bad habits which need fine-tuning? If there are issues in performance, then it is a good idea to recommend improvements, not only within the learner's workplace, but perhaps in case you will need to train another individual if the bad habit was formed because of the training you provided. Alright, so moving on to your project, and you will notice that the content of this webinar focuses on Project 3 in your delivery cluster. Overall, you would just need to demonstrate how you've facilitated one-on-one learning in the workplace twice. Remember, if a learner is new to the workplace and doesn't know how to use the organizational printer, for example, then showing them how to use it counts as workplace training. Some people can get this project confused with the first two projects, so it's important to understand the difference. In Projects 1 and 2, there is a focus on conducting group training. This will be in a learning environment. Project 3 focuses on one-on-one training. This will be in a workplace environment. The points on the slides are the main requirements of Project 3. Firstly, there isn't any specified time frame to conduct these workplace training sessions. However, we believe 10 minutes should be as a minimum for each section. Remember that you will need to meet the requirements in the observation checklist. This project, unlike the others, doesn't need to go for too long. The one-on-one workplace learning sessions must be based on the same competency standards within a unit of your choice. The competency standards you select should be transferable to a workplace. A good example of this is the BSB WOR 204 Use Business Technology. You could use the competency standards from this unit to train an individual in almost any type of business technology, from the printer to a computer. The two learning sessions you conduct should be the same, however they must be conducted with different individuals at different times. This is not negotiable. The main reason is that, just like your other projects, you'll need to comply with the competency standards of the unit. Conducting the workplace session with two individuals at the same time might seem logical, but for the purpose of this project, it really needs to be on an individual level. Essentially, you will need to demonstrate evidence of building a professional relationship with an individual in the workplace. My suggestion with this project, like many other projects, is not to overthink it. If you complete the documents as best as you can, and you can demonstrate evidence of transferring the skills and knowledge to the learner, then you shouldn't run into too many problems. Alright, so here's a list of things to complete and submit for Project 3 for the delivery cluster. So, because you're doing two different individualized workplace pathways, then there needs to be pretty much two of everything. So For each learner, there'll be an individualized learning plan. There'll also be a specific workplace session plan, as well as a specific workplace learning pathway plan. We also need evidence that you have actually conducted the one-on-one training with each individual at different times. Okay, it is individualized, so for the purpose of the project, it needs to be conducted on 2 separate occasions, and then at the end of the day, you'll need to conduct a few learning reviews. And again, a lot of these documents you'll have access to in the simulated RTO, your appendices. So you're not creating these templates from scratch. They are provided for you. There is plenty of guidance when completing these activities, so I don't think you'll run into too many problems with completing this. Just please don't overthink it. Just focus on one-on-one workplace training. You can be creative with it, train someone in content you're familiar with, and yeah, this one should be knocked over pretty quickly. So it's a pretty short webinar for this one, webinar 5. So if you have any questions about this one, you can call the office on 1300 737 006. You can also contact your trainer, or you can email your trainer at ilec.edu.au so you can have more of a chat with us. So my name's Nick, and thanks for listening in on webinar 5. Hope everyone gets a lot out of it, and yeah, any questions, feel free to ask. Thank you.